So you just heard Mark 6, 1 through 6. And Jesus revisits his hometown of Nazareth, and they're trying to figure out who this guy is. In 2016, ABC relaunched a very old TV program. The first time that TV program ran was from 1956 to 1978. It was called To Tell the Truth. And it's a show where you have four celebrities trying to figure out which of three contestants is actually the real person. So you might have someone on there and they say, one of these guys is the real, George Johnson, who's a millionaire who invented the rubber chicken and made his millions in that. And they're asking him all kinds of questions to figure out, is this really the guy who invented the rubber chicken? And eventually they say, will the real George Johnson please stand up? Now imagine you were watching that show. And there's three contestants, and then there's like robes and sandals, and they have beards and long hair. And they say, contestant number 1, what is your name? I am Jesus of Nazareth. Contestant number 2, I am Jesus of Nazareth. Contestant number 3, I am Jesus of Nazareth. Well, they're going to ask him a lot of questions to try to figure out which one's the real one. And eventually they're going to say, will the real Jesus of Nazareth please stand up? When Jesus walks into his hometown of Nazareth after being gone for a little while and establishing his ministry around the town of Capernaum, they're going to ask him some questions because they're trying to figure out who is the real Jesus. Will the real Jesus please stand up? We thought we knew you, but you seem a bit different. This isn't the first time he's gone home since he started his ministry. This time it's full of a lot of questions. The first time he went home, Luke records in his gospel, chapter 4, was very problematic. Jesus went into the synagogue when he got there. He reads from the scroll of Isaiah about the coming Messiah, the deliverer, the anointed one. And he says after reading those verses, hey guys, by the way, that is fulfilled in your hearing today. How did they respond to his claims of being the Messiah then? Luke 4:29, they rose up and drove him out of the town and brought him to the brow of the hill on which their town was built so that they could throw him down the cliff. Quite a homecoming. Mind you, the town of Nazareth has known Jesus for a long time. They've watched him grow from toddler, it's guessed he came back from Egypt, anywhere between ages 2 and 3. From toddler to teenager, through his 20s, they know that this guy can build houses, but really claims of building a kingdom? I mean, what happened? You went away last year, you came back, Jesus, is this the same Jesus we know? Luke 3:23, Jesus was about 30 when he began his ministry, but he's been gone for a year, comes back home. What's he been doing? Well, we know what he's been doing. He's been planting seeds in the kingdom in the soil around the Sea of Galilee. But now he's come home because his idea is to plant the seeds of the kingdom in his hometown of Nazareth. Jesus has been scattering the seeds of the kingdom on all kinds of soil, and he's about to find out what kind of soil his hometown is. In chapter 4 of Mark, Jesus told a parable about a sower and some seeds. Mark 4:14, he said, the sower sows the word in hopes that it will grow, in hopes that it will produce fruit. Now, my daughter Caroline has planted a garden just behind our shed for the last several years. And it has varied in its, in its produce, in its fruit. And we've tried to help her, but, bugs eat stuff, sun burns stuff. The first year we put too much manure in there and the soil wasn't quite right. We tried to adjust it. It's complicated. And when you throw seeds on it or plants on it, it feels like we're never quite sure what is going to result. And people are like soil, Jesus says. And Nazareth is like soil. And different people, and it seems different places that he goes, respond differently to the seed that is planted there. So if you were to go back to Mark chapter 4, he describes all those soils. He says there's 4 kinds of soil. There's, the soil that's the path. And when seed is thrown on the path, Satan just comes along and he snatches it up. There's soil that is a rocky place that receives it with joy, but it just doesn't take root and the plants fall away. Or there's seed that when the thorns come up, it's like the cares of this world choking out the seed that's been planted there. But then there's a 4th kind of soil. And he says it's good soil. This soil receives the seed, it accepts it, and eventually grows and it bears fruit. And he has demonstrated, as he has scattered seed throughout Galilee, that there are different kinds of soil, but good soil often shows up in very unlikely places. Places that would surprise us. Chapter 5, the very chapter that preceded what we're looking at today, Jesus scattered the seed in a Gentile graveyard. And what resulted? A guy who was filled with thousands of demons was delivered, and he himself was raised to new life, grew, and wanted to plant seed. Jesus scattered seed in a Gentile grave street where people were pressing in to get him, and you might not even notice that there was a woman who was trying desperately to get to him. She finally touches the hem of his garment. Seems like unlikely soil, but that unclean, suffering woman was delivered, and she went away in peace. You also read in chapter 5 of another unlikely place. It's just a children's bedroom. And when he's on his way there, the 12-year-old girl passes away. How in the world do you scatter seeds of life there? He goes there, he raises her to new life, and all are amazed. Mark is going out of his way to say this is where Jesus has been scattering the seeds of life in unlikely places, and it has produced fruit. But in each of those cases, it wasn't simply what was sown, but it's who was sown. Jesus is sowing himself into those places. Will the real Jesus of Nazareth please stand up? He has, again and again and again. But now he walks into Nazareth, and it's different. It's different. Jesus will sow himself into his hometown. It's not just his words. It's not just his wisdom. It's not just his works. He's sowing himself there because he is the seed that must be. He's sowing himself. And will they receive him? That's the big question. Not will they listen to his words. Not will they be amazed by his works. Will they receive him? Because Jesus has walked into Nazareth, and Jesus is the promised seed of hope and salvation. He's been scattered throughout Galilee. He's been testing all the soils in the various synagogues. He's tested the soil along the lake shore. He's tested the soil in graveyards and on streets and in these bedrooms and homes and in the hearts of the people he's gone to. And now he's going to test the soil in the place that he lived some 30 years, where he grew up in Nazareth. Good soil has been found in very unlikely places. However, not in Nazareth. Jesus finds good soil, obviously, among those people who weren't even familiar with him, people that had never even met him. He finds good soil in their hearts. But it seems that among those that were extremely familiar with him, it's harder to get the seed to take root. And I wonder if that doesn't describe many of us who have grown up in the church. Resistant soil. We're so familiar with him. How do we receive him? Jesus lands on the rocky soil of his hometown. Verses 1 and 2 of Mark 6. He went away from there and he came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. And on the Sabbath, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? What is the wisdom given to him? How are such mighty works done by his hands?" Jesus comes home again, But what is different this time? Something is obviously different than the first time he came home. I think this time he's got a larger reputation. They have heard about what's been going on in all these other places. And not only does he have a larger reputation, he's got a larger retinue of followers. There's a lot of people with him now. And his hometown's probably like, man, what are we going to do with all these people Jesus just showed up with? And why did they follow him? What is up with Jesus? Jane Ann Phillips, who's an author, wrote, "Towns change, they grow or diminish, but hometowns remain as we left them." Nazareth did. It remained just as he had left it. And unfortunately, it will remain just as he leaves it. They rejected his identity before. They will reject his identity now, and they have continued to reject his identity. If you go to Nazareth today, 70% Muslim. Still today, rejecting the identity of Jesus. In John chapter 1, verse 46, Nathanael famously asks, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" This is after Philip has gone to him and said, "I have found the one that Moses spoke of. I have found the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth." And then Nathanael says what everyone would have been thinking had they heard that. Nazareth? Like the one camel town? You know, that you got to be going there to get there? It's like on a road to nowhere. Really? Nazareth? Nazareth is not even mentioned in the Bible at all until this point. It's just not an important place. The population of Nazareth at this point is a few hundred people from just a few families. They all know each other. But one family in particular in Nazareth is rather important, because history tells us that one clan from the family of David moved to Nazareth at about 100 BC. They settled there because they're trying to avoid the Hasmoneans, who have risen to power and are trying to decimate the royal line so there would be no one to threaten the throne. They burned the genealogies of the family of David. And so the family of David, at least this clan, goes to Nazareth. And they name a town. What do they name it? Nazareth, which in the Hebrew at its root means the branch. Why would they name it that? Perhaps because they thought, we will escape the threat of the Hasmonean Empire. We will come here. We will preserve our line because we know what the prophet Isaiah told us. In Isaiah 11, 1 through 2, "There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse," that's the father of David, "and a branch from his root shall bear fruit." A branch will grow up. To be what? "The Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might." They believed that a branch would grow up with wisdom and with powerful works in their midst to be a deliverer. But somehow they missed Jesus. A few years before Jesus' birth, there was a Roman armory about 4 miles north of Nazareth that was robbed by the locals. Rome didn't take too kindly to that. And in retaliation, they crucify 2,000 people from that region. I'm sure Nazareth was included in that. And some of their people were killed. They long for a deliverer. They long for the Messiah. But the sad thing is this hometown of Jesus doesn't even realize that the Messiah grew up like a branch in their midst. The branch of Jesse, the king from the line of David, was right there, and they didn't even notice. That's an amazing thought about Jesus. And the people from his hometown are quite astonished and amazed by Jesus, but it's not because of that true identity. Though he claimed this amazing title of Messiah even before when they tried to kill him, what are they amazed by now? It says they're amazed at him. They're amazed at his words, at his wisdom, at his works. If you look at the second half of verse 2, where did this man get these things? What is the wisdom given to him? How are such mighty works done by his hand? They are astonished. They're knocked out, that word means. They've been struck with amazement. Their jaws have dropped open. They cannot believe the words and the wisdom and the works of Jesus. Now, he's not done any real works here, so it must be that what they've heard about him. They say, where did he get these things? That's like asking, when he went away, is there a seminary in Capernaum? I don't recall that. Where did he study this? Does he have a diploma? They go on to say, where is the wisdom given to him? In other words, Jesus, show us your ordination papers. Like, who was the rabbi you studied under? There wasn't one? How are such mighty works done? You know what they're asking? They're like, for 30 years, you lived here in our midst, and we didn't see any of that for 30 years. Like, what voodoo is this? Like, what is going on here? We don't understand. They're astonished because they thought they knew him, and now they can't figure him out. I went to college with a guy named Lee Vukic. And in college, I would say that Lee practiced some disturbing behavior. We were at a Christian college, but he didn't go there for the Christian part of it. That was pretty obvious. But I liked Lee. We were friends. He let me borrow his sport coat when I went to homecoming with Carla. Actually, that was the year before that, wasn't it? But Lee, I wouldn't have expected him to amount to any great person of faith until he called me 20 years after we had graduated. He called me. And I said, hey, man, this is amazing. It's great to catch up. What are you doing? And he said, are you sitting down? I said, well, okay, I'll sit down. Tell me. He said, well, Dan, after college, he said, man, God got a hold of me. I was a youth pastor for 10 years straight. And you want to know where I am now? I am the chair of church ministries at Liberty University. And I just wrote a book. Here's the title, Protecting Your Teen from Disturbing Behavior. I was like, okay, I thought I knew Vuk, but he was different now. And I think that's what the people of Nazareth are struggling with. They're like, we thought we knew you. That was you. What in the world has happened to you? And so the seed that Jesus sows into the town of Nazareth is falling on a rocky place because they receive it with joy. They're astonished. They're amazed. However, it doesn't last. Rocky soil. Their roots in Jesus only go as deep as their human understanding of him. That's it. And they're offended by him. Jesus comes to his hometown, and Jesus causes offense, not because of what he does, but because of who he is. Verse 3, is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Edgar Watson Hose, a magazine editor, wrote once, nothing is wonderful when you get used to it. They're just a little too used to what they previously knew about Jesus. He's just too familiar. And so they start questioning Jesus' credentials. Do you catch that? Isn't he the carpenter? Isn't that just Mary's son? Does he really have the credentials here? Interestingly enough, the demons never did this. 4 times so far in the Gospel of Mark, demons have identified Jesus for exactly who he is, saying, you are the Holy One of God, you are the Son of God, you are the Son of the Most High. But also 4 times so far in the Gospel of Mark, he has recorded people, humans, asking questions like, what is this? Why does he talk like this? Who is this? Or here in chapter 6, isn't this just Jesus? I think there comes a time when you have to move beyond the head, move into the heart, let the Spirit of God stop you from asking questions. This is what Job said. Job 40, verse 2 through 5, God says, do you still want to argue with the Almighty? You are God's critic, but do you have the answers, Job? And Job replied to the Lord, I am nothing. How could I ever find the answers? I will cover my mouth with my hand. I have said too much already. I have nothing more to say. Oh, we could learn a lot from Job's words. There comes a time when you just cover your mouth. I have nothing more to say. And you have to deal with who Jesus is. In questioning Jesus' credentials, they are rejecting Jesus' identity. This is what they are doing. Isn't he just a carpenter? We know Jesus. Isn't he just a common laborer? Isn't he the guy with the orange vest at Home Depot? Okay, I know that he can help me put together my lawnmower, but is he really going to help me put together my life? Is he really going to help put together the world? That's not how we know Jesus. Mark is writing to a Greek audience here. He knows that in mentioning this question, isn't he the carpenter, that Greeks would take offense at it. A common laborer like that, really the Messiah of the world? Come on. Who is he to make such claims? The Greek philosopher Celsus in the 2nd century would sneer, saying Christianity was founded by an illegitimate son of a carpenter. They're questioning his credentials. Isn't he just the carpenter? And isn't he Mary's son? Now, sons in this culture would have been identified by the father. Matter of fact, in Luke chapter 4, when he went home the first time, they said, hey, this is Joseph's son. Something switched here. Now they're saying, isn't this Mary's son? I think by now they're just kind of fed up with Jesus. Isn't he just a carpenter? Isn't he just a commoner? And isn't he Mary's son? You know, we're not really sure what went down 30 years ago. Is he illegitimate? News of that illegitimacy would travel to Jerusalem, and religious leaders there would find out, because in John 8:41, the Jewish leaders say, hey, we aren't illegitimate children when speaking to Jesus. We know your past. We aren't illegitimate children. Isn't this just a carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son? Isn't this just a man? Come on, we know his family. His brothers are here with us. His 2 sisters live here in the town. He's one of us. He's nothing unique. Obviously, his brothers at this point don't believe he is who he says he is. Matter of fact, in Mark chapter 3, when Jesus was talking outside of the home and causing sort of a ruckus, and they said we couldn't even eat, there were so many people, his family, it says, draws him back into the house, and they say, he's out of his mind. He's going nuts. Why does he make these claims? But some of his brothers eventually do believe. Otherwise, you would not have the letter of James in your New Testament. Otherwise, you would not have the letter of Jude, probably Judas here in Mark 6. Some of them eventually believe. Some of them actually become part of Jesus' real family and not just his relatives from Nazareth. Because Jesus defined exactly what family is in Mark 3:35 when he said, whoever does the will of God is my brother, is my sister, is my mother. And then he defined for us exactly what the will of God was in John 6:40. This is the will of my Father, that everyone who looks on the Son and believes in him should have eternal life. My real family is made up of brothers and sisters and mothers who believe I am who I say I am, the Son of God. So apparently he really didn't have much family in Nazareth, if we look at it that way. I find that hometown turf is really good for a local band, but perhaps not for those that claim they're God. You know, you start a local band, everybody's like, cool, these guys, they're from here, they make cool music, and like all of a sudden you're popular, they're entertained. But say, oh, by the way, and I am the Messiah, that obviously doesn't go over very well. So the people of Nazareth would have been just fine if Jesus had taken up a guitar, entertained them a little bit with some words and some ways, and they would have been charmed by all of that. But instead, he challenges them. It's one thing to charm people. It's another thing when you start to challenge what they believe right here. And they take offense. No one in Nazareth is walking up to Jesus and going, I always knew you'd grow up to be the Messiah, It's just, that's not going on here. So they stumble over Jesus' divinity. If we're going to say it's his identity, the real problem is his divinity. Look at the second half of verse 3. And they took offense at him. When it says they took offense, that word is scandalon, from where we get our word scandal. These people are scandalized. They are shocked. They are caught off guard. They are tripped up as they go along trying to figure out who Jesus is. Scandalon is used in the New Testament in these ways. It is used to describe someone that you would trip over, or something that would cause you to stumble, or to perhaps even no longer believe, or to reject the faith. It's used to describe something that would cause you to fall or to become angry or to become shocked. Scandalon literally means the little wooden stick that is a trigger on a fall trap. That's the scandalon. And if it's struck, the trap falls on you. It's also used of a stone that would cause someone to trip or to fall. It is the scandalon that causes people to stumble. Jesus is that stone, is that trigger in the life of the people of Nazareth. They're tripping over him. It's like we've been walking along this familiar path all of our lives, and Jesus is a stone in the path. We've always just been able to walk past him, no big deal. And then all of a sudden, he raises up a little higher, and everybody is tripping over the stone. And what does Nazareth want to do with this stone that causes them to trip? Dig it up and get it out of here. Remove it. What do you do with this stone? Jesus becomes the rejected stone in Nazareth. They might have looked back to Isaiah with hope of a deliverer, hope of a Messiah. But they could have also read this passage in Isaiah, chapter 8, 14 through 15. And he will become a sanctuary and a stone of offense, a rock of stumbling to both houses of Israel, a trap and a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And many shall stumble on it. They shall fall and be broken. They shall be snared and taken. This is what's happening in Nazareth. There was a Jewish legend about the construction of the first temple in Jerusalem. And the story went that the stones for the temple came from a distant quarry where they were cut and they were shaped and they were marked so that they could be put in place by the builders. And the stones were then sent to the temple construction site. And when the builders received them, they began to organize themselves and lay out all the stones and look at what they needed to do. And they saw a particular stone that looked different. It didn't seem to fit, and they rejected it. But then they realized that something was missing, and they sent back to the quarry, and they said, by the way, we have all the stones here, except for the stone to get started, the cornerstone. And news came back, that's the one you rejected. Put it in place, and everything else will line up. Nazareth has rejected that stone. How will they build anything without it? Matthew 11:6, Jesus spoke up and said, blessed is the one who is not offended by me. Blessed is the one who does not reject me. Blessed is the one who does not remove me, who does not stumble over me and then decide to dig me up and to get rid of me. Jesus has come home. Jesus has caused offense, and now we discover that Jesus can't work because of the unbelief that he discovers in his hometown. Verses 4 through 6. And Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and among his relatives and in his own household. And he could do no mighty work there except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. And he went about among the villages teaching. Jesus, up to this point, has displayed tremendous power. He has displayed power over nature when he calmed a storm. He has displayed power over demons when he cast thousands out of that one man. He has displayed power over death just prior to this passage when he raised that girl to new life. He has displayed power over nature, over demons, over death, but apparently not in Nazareth, not in this town. It's not going to happen. They refuse him. The very one they've been hoping for, they refuse him. In 2005, when Katrina went through New Orleans, a Coast Guard helicopter flew rescues into that town. And the Coast Guard lieutenant who was overseeing that said on 3 missions that they flew in there, they were able to rescue 89 people, 3 dogs, and 2 cats. He said on the 4th run, we encountered something quite different. Though we flew over 12 times, we found no one who would accept our help. Plenty of people, but they all refused. Jesus has rescued so many people up to this point, and yet when he flies the rescue mission over Nazareth, no thanks. No thanks. He told a parable about this. When he told a parable about a vineyard owner who planted a vineyard and then he leased it to some tenants. And when that vineyard eventually produced fruit, he sent servants there to get the yield of that fruit. But when the servants showed up at the vineyard, what happened? They not only reject the servants, they beat them, they stone them. And so the vineyard owner says, I know what I'll do. I'll send my own son because they will recognize him. And the tenants kill his son. Right after telling that parable, Jesus says these words in Matthew 21:42. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Not in this town. Not in this town. Belief and unbelief affect Jesus' response, and that's what we see here. What did he do for the bleeding woman in the last chapter? He healed her. And why? We're told in Mark 5:34, Jesus says, daughter, your faith has made you well. Why did Jesus heal Jairus' daughter? Mark 5:36, he says to Jairus, do not fear, only believe. Jesus is constantly responding to faith and belief, and he's doing great and mighty things, but not in this town. Verse 5, he could do no mighty work there. And that begs the question, was he powerless? Really? Could Jesus not do anything there? Like the belief-o-meter was so low that the sled couldn't fly? Remember that in Elf? You know, the crash landing in Central Park. They're like, we just got to get people to believe, and the belief-o-meter will go up. And, you know, the best way to spread Christmas cheer is singing loud for all to hear. And they sing, and all of a sudden it goes up, and the sleigh flies. Is that what's going on here with Jesus? Like he just literally couldn't do it unless he had some more belief in the tank? Jesus' power does not depend on us. Understand this. But his response may. Jesus could do mighty works because Matthew puts this a different way. Same story, but he says Jesus just didn't. Matthew 13:58, he did not do many mighty works there. Now, I love that because it says he did not do many mighty works. That means he actually did some. And remember how Mark said it? He couldn't do any work there, but he did heal a few people. In the midst of the hostile and hateful and hurtful town of Nazareth, Jesus shows compassion to those who do believe. They experienced what the others did not experience. Jesus marveled at the faith of the few, but he also marvels at unbelief. Jesus, as is said in the scriptures, only marveled twice. This word is only used of him twice. Once here in Nazareth, he marveled at what? Unbelief. Verse 6, he marveled because of their unbelief. There's only one other time that it says Jesus marveled, and that's in Capernaum, where he marvels at the belief of a non-Jewish Roman official, a centurion who has a sick servant, and he says, let's send for Jesus that he might heal my servant. In Luke 7, verse 6, and Jesus went with them. When he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I did not presume to come to you. But say the word, and let my servant be healed. For I too am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes. To another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it. And when Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turning to the crowd that followed him, said, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. You know what the centurion was doing? He was not simply going on, wow, this guy has some really good words and some great wisdom. Or I've heard about the works he's done. Maybe he could do one of those for my servant. No, all of the talk here is, I don't just recognize Jesus' power, I recognize his position. I know his identity. And Jesus marvels at this man's faith. So let's close with this. Why do many people grow up with Jesus and decide not to follow? That hits home for many of you. Is he just too familiar? Was he just like a brother I grew up with, a friend I grew up with? But all the Lord stuff? Barna Research has done a recent survey saying 64% of ages 18 to 29 who grow up in the church will drop out of Christianity, or have. 64% stumble and fall on the rock of offense. Here's good news, my friend. 36% don't. 36% stick with it. They are resilient disciples who keep following Jesus in spite of questions, in spite of tensions, in spite of pressures. They stick with it. So far, in 6 chapters of the Gospel of Mark, we have read 6 times that his disciples followed him. When Jesus revisits the hometown where he is so familiar, perhaps right here in your head, what will he find? What does he find? Will he marvel? He's going to marvel. It's going to either be an unbelief or belief. Is your heart the rocky soil of Nazareth where he can do no work, where he will do no work? Will you limit all that Jesus wants to do because you find him just too familiar or perhaps offensive? Or will you be among the few that were sick in Nazareth that day and who believed and were restored?